Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Keegan. I am joined today by Soli Aga and Pat Needles from Equidox, and this is our Equidox Introductory Topics training session. A few housekeeping items as we get started today. Please mute your line. I'm sure you are having wonderful conversations in your office, but we do not necessarily want to hear them. So if you are using a computer to participate in the session, you'll find a little microphone icon called mute. Go ahead and click on that so we do not hear your office conversations. If you do have a question, you can always unmute your line. So, but we just ask that you have it muted if you're just listening and viewing the presentation. We will be recording this session, and we will make that available back on the CCC Accessibility Center website. Please ask questions. We will be monitoring the chat today, so if you are not comfortable asking a question out loud, then please feel free to use the chat room feature, and we will be monitoring that and responding accordingly in either the chat room or in the presentation itself. Now, a question that comes up oftentimes is, can I go to multiple sessions? Absolutely. Please come to multiple sessions. We will be having our next Equidox training session on Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And that will be on advanced topics and advanced features of the Equidox application. But I also want to point out that we have help videos in Equidox. When you log into the Equidox interface, on the left-hand side, there's a little question mark. And if you go to that question mark, which is the help section, there are a number of help videos. Think of them as just-in-time learning videos and how to perform certain features or functions in the Equidox application. So I like to point that out simply because people often have a question that can be quickly referenced and answered by checking out those help videos. They're very short form videos, 2 to 3 minutes in length, and are designed to get you an answer on a very specific question. So take a look at those. And as I mentioned before, recording will be available on the Accessibility Center website. So with that, I am going to go ahead and stop sharing at this time and turn this over to Pat Needles and Soli Aga from Equidox.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. Perfect introduction. Today we have 5 sections that we're going to cover in today's introductory training, and I think you're going to find them very helpful. As Sean said, in the application are a number of minute or 2 training topics, videos that you can watch as well. And feel free to post questions in the chat room, and we'll answer them as we see fit during the presentation. We may take a couple minutes after each topic and go over some of the questions. If we don't have any, we'll move on, but we'll leave a few minutes at the end for additional questions and answer time. So with that being said, I will introduce Soli Aga. He is our systems engineer, and he will be doing the training today. So thank you very much, folks, for joining us, and we look forward to today's session.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate the intro. And Sean, thank you, everyone. Welcome to Equidox. So I'll just do a quick check for sound and screen. Can you see my screen and can you hear me?
Yes to both, Soli.
Perfect.
Looks good.
Great. So this is Equidox. I'll start off right at the very top, which would basically be the ability to log in. So once you've talked to Sean and been created a user, you should receive a validation email that will enable you to click on a link and follow that to validate the account and log right in. You have an option for single sign-on with Google. That's something your admin can set up for you. It's not guaranteed you'll be able to, but if you have a Google account and your admin sees fit to give you access to use that, you're able to sign in with Google, which I'll do. And hopefully it remembers my creds, so I don't have to re-enter them. Lovely. So once you've logged in, you may see a list of documents or you may see no documents. That'll be up to your administrator to assign or share documents to you. If you want to also, you can upload your own documents, which is something we're going to look at in just a second. So right here we have the document queue. It's just basically a list of PDFs that have been imported into the system. Those all came in through the import document tab. So you're able to drag and drop documents into this area, or of course, single click here and select them from a file browser, which we'll do in just a sec. Over here you have notifications. It just gives you a bit of an idea in regards to what's been happening in the system. So you can take a peek to see what new docs have been made available or other types of information. Here there's the option to set up labels. So if you wanted to categorize and give color to your document structure and ultimately give them a label with a description, that's something you could do here. There's groups and accounts. I won't get into these. They're pretty self-explanatory, and it's really something that the administrator would handle. So if you are, in fact, an administrator, feel free to ask some questions about administering the system to either any of us, really, myself, Pat, or Sean, or Angela, at any point, either during this tutorial or perhaps after. And search is for a search appliance that we're not going to talk about today, but it's essentially a hookup for something called MindBreeze. If you know what that is, great. If you don't, great, because we're not going to look at it today. So let's get started. I'm just going to start right from the top. So I woke up this morning and came to work and found in my inbox a PDF, and someone asked me to make it accessible. So that's definitely something I want to try to do. So this is the document I'm going to select. Oh, having a little selection issue. There we go. Must be because of the screen share. Okay, so Equidox is going to basically, first step is to upload the file to the file store. So this file will go up as is, no changes made whatsoever, and we're just going to store it, and we're going to keep it in case ever anything happens, or of course we want to revise the original doc. Once it's uploaded to the file server, we're going to import it into Equidox. So right here, there's a process of detection taking place. So Equidox is trying to find any assets inside your document that may contain lists, tables, images, text, of course, if available, any heading structure, whatever may be there, hyperlinks, etc. So if we have a proper structure or some sort of data attribute that's identifiable, Equidox will do its best to try to identify those assets, ultimately saving us a little bit of work at the end of the day when we're trying to convert. So now that this document is ready for conversion, which basically means that Equidox has done an auto detection and imported, we're able to open it and start our conversion process. So what we see here is a view of the document itself. We can see that it has roughly 12 pages. I can also see that it has 12 pages down here. This properties tab shows me some document metadata that may be available. For example, the document title, which may differ from the document file name. So as you can see in this case, it definitely does. The creation date of that document, the modification date of that document, possibly the producer, and of course, the number of images. There's more meta available possibly. In this case, we have definitely the title. We also have the format. And then we can also add other meta values if we want to, like maybe type, and we could say it's just part of the California Community College system. So these will enable us to do searches within both HTML and the PDF itself with our current search engines. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not necessary to fill these out. I just wanted to show you that in some cases, they'll definitely be automatically populated. I'm going to skip the images tab for 1 second and come right back to it. Here's history. So it gives us a little bit of history regarding this particular document, and we can see that it was imported 2 minutes ago. Permissions, if ever this document were shared via the share tab, I would see the shares here, be it groups or users specifically. Then there's the output tab. So this is where we end our day, and we'll be revisiting this at the end of the session. But this is where we would export to HTML, PDF, or EPUB. So this is where the meat and potatoes comes from all of the effort that we made chopping vegetables and stuff earlier. So let's get cooking. The first thing to do as a chef or as a document remediator is to do your mise en place. So mise en place is really going to mean trying to get as much done before we hit the fire as possible. So that's going to mean, in this case, checking out our images tab. So I had skipped it earlier, but we're going to jump right into it now. And what we see here is a list of all the images that are residing inside this document. So I can see that I have 6, and I can see that their alt tag description is empty. I also see that their long description is empty. That's why I get this little red flag here. Now, I have an option, of course, of filling in all the descriptions here if I wanted to, but maybe I don't have enough context to say just 2 people. Do I really know what they're doing or what their context is? Probably not. I may want to wait to see if this couple are important to the context of the doc. I may also want to see if these pillars are important to the context of the doc. But if I can guess that they're not, I can just go ahead, hide the zone, and hide the image. So basically, this will not need to be remediated. And then for these other ones that I'm not certain about, I can just wait. We'll just do this one as an example. If I'm curious enough, I can click on the image itself, and it will take me directly to the location in the document where that image resides. And then I can make a more educated decision about whether this image needs to be remediated or not. So just cutting back here. This images tab comes in most handily if your document has a lot of branding data. So what is branding data? In this doc, we can see that there's a little blue border at the bottom of this page. It's not an image, so it's not showing up here. It's just part of the background of the doc. So we don't need to remediate it because it's not part of the content. But in other cases, these little blue bars across each of the page might very easily show up here in this list. So instead of dealing with them on every page, we can just hide them all and hide all the zones in one single step. So that makes getting rid of document clutter a lot easier. So what we recommend is once you've imported a doc, you come to the images tab and just have a quick look to see what kind of noise the images in the document are creating. If you're unsure, there's no problem just leaving them here intact, and we can deal with them later. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll just hide the zone and the image for the pillars, because I can promise you they're not adding a lot of value in this document, and I'll save that change. So once you've looked at your images and you've got a pretty good feeling about what you're going to need to do for the rest of the doc, you're ready to basically start remediating. So to start remediating, you pick a page, you click on it, and it brings us in to the page remediation screen. So up here, you see that you have 3 tabs. The first one is page. So this gives you properties that are changeable essentially for the entire page. Those would include the non-changeable page number, the non-changeable last saved time, but definitely changeable notes. So if ever you're unsure about something or would like to confer with another specialist or perhaps your administrator, it's very easy to add notes here, looking for subject matter expertise regarding are these 2 students required part of documentation. So that could be a student question, sorry, that we ask later. we can put a little note here, and that note is basically attached to the entire page. The next thing we see here is something called the sensitivity slider. So what we notice on the page right now are these little areas that if I mouse over, change color. So these are zones. Zones are what we use to manage the remediation. Each zone will have a type, and we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail later. So this is the zone tab. And as you can see, each zone has a certain number of properties, including the name, a type, and we'll look at these in a second, a language. This is to override the default language of the document, which I forgot to mention, and I'll show you, was set over here. So I forgot because usually documents are English in this current cycle, but they may be French. I'm in Quebec, so I see a lot of French docs. And moreover, I see a lot of bilingual docs. So we may start with a default language of English, and then of course, take it upon ourselves to change that to French, should we ever see different languages. And of course, the list goes on. So there's no need for you to know the languages. This is really just an indicator for a screen reader, or anything that uses ASCII code with accents or whatever the case may be, where knowing the language may come in useful. So I know, in fact, for screen readers, it's quite handy because it becomes a French gentleman instead of an English gentleman reading the text to you, and it makes a lot more sense with the pronunciation and all that other good stuff. We see that the zone has an order. So right in the corner of each zone, as you can see, there's a little green number. That is actually the official reading order of these assets. So when a screen reader encounters these zones, it's going to read each zone based on the order that we've provided. So if we don't have a correct reading order here, the screen reader is also going to read in an order that follows essentially whatever we've provided, be it incorrect or correct. So in this case, things look pretty good. It's going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and to 6, which is essentially what I see as a reading order for this page. So there are other properties to this zone that we'll look at in a bit, but I just wanted to show you that zones exist and that they may or may not have a type. So once we know that zones exist, we'll understand a little better what to do with this sensitivity slider. So this is not the best page to demonstrate sensitivity just because of the particular granularity of this page. It's fairly blocky and we don't really gain that much from using the sensitivity slider. But if I go to a page like this, for example, page 5, what we see here, and I'll demonstrate, and I'll just pin this, whoops, sorry. I'll do that, and that, and that. Okay. So what we see here is we have a page sensitivity of 5, which gives me what looks like 50 plus zones, which gives me what looks like 50 plus paragraphs with little tiny line breaks at the end, and these sentences are all broken up, and it kind of looks terrible, but actually it looks great because it mimics what we see here, but it's not what we want. So what we're going to do, and if I show you a sensitivity of 0, we have no zones. So no zones will obviously give us no text. And then if I start selecting zones moving up, we'll see that we get back to that granularity level of assets where we have a line break between each of these lines, which is not what we want. So we'll slide the sensitivity up ever higher until we get a paragraph structure that starts to make sense, which this definitely does. I have 3 paragraphs on the page, which is exactly right. So now if I do a preview, and I'll explain the preview a little better in a second, what I see is that I have a block of text that represents a 3-paragraph reading structure. So that's great. That's makes much more sense to us as consumers, as readers, to have 3 paragraphs. It'll also make a lot more sense to a screen reader, excuse me, when it's reading. And what I mean by that is if we had a screen reader read this, it would stop and essentially take a breath at the end of each line. So it would read, in 2010, the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, have undergone compliance reviews, and it's not what we want. What we really want is a smooth paragraph style reading order. So in 2001, the DOJ and the US Department of Education, etc., that will go much more smoothly. It'll read from left to right, and it makes a lot more sense in terms of what we're trying to accomplish as conversion specialists than, say, providing what would have been 44 separate paragraphs. So now that that's been explained a little bit, the sensitivity slider and some zones, I'll just explain the preview quickly to you. So this is an HTML preview. It's generated by Equidox based on the changes that we've made to the page. We use HTML as a preview for two reasons. The first one is it's a valid output that we offer. So it's not just being used for preview, it's actually one of our offerings. And the reason for that is that it's a hyper portable, transportable, accessible type of document that we love to see being used in anywhere really, EDU or finance, or wherever the case may be. But as we all know, not everybody uses HTML. A lot of people will still want to use the PDF. So I'm going to show you quickly that in the background, I was asked not to show code, but I'm just going to show you that this is mimicking what we want in HTML. So that's essentially all we're showing that for, is that if we see a structure here that makes a lot of sense, then it's very likely that the source code behind this will also be well structured. And it's very likely that when we go to export to PDF, that structure will ensue. So this is why we use a PDF, an HTML preview, is because it is actually the closest to understanding the structure as we can get in real time. So while it may not be stylistically beautiful, it's very, very accurate. And I'll just mention that for anyone interested in making this stylistically beautiful, you can always insert a style sheet. So we'll just leave it at that. So getting back to business here, let's start on the first page. And what I'll do is I'll convert this from the top down, just as if I'm starting from scratch, which I am. So first and foremost, I know that sensitivity isn't really going to make a big difference on this page. So there's not really too much to worry about here. If ever I have a document, and this document is almost the same all the way through, but if I'm converting a textbook and I can see that each page is going to probably have the exact same sensitivity, once I've set it on the first page, I can apply it to the rest of the document. So I won't have to reset this for every page, just one that is representative of the doc, and then I can keep moving forward. So when you're lucky and you get a textbook or something pretty straightforward, that's going to come in very handy. When you're unlucky, and that means you get a magazine or a newsletter or an advertisement, sensitivity might not work as well at the document level because each page has been designed by somebody else in a different way with a different font, and that's all good stuff. It's just we'll just have to determine sensitivity for each of those pages once we arrive. Reading order, we'll look at that in a little bit, but this essentially allows you to reset the reading order for the page from a default top-down, left to right, to a 2-column, which would be, of course, a left and a right column, a 3-column, which we see pretty commonly in certain textbooks, you know, some journals and other stuff like that, and then 4-column. Newspapers can often be 4-column, but also any textbook that's been published with the even and odd pages side by side, we may want to invoke a 4-column reading order. But we'll look at that later because we will need to reset our reading order. On this page, it's not very hard because it's very basic, left to right, not much going on. So let's start with this image. So I'm going to click on that image. It turns red. It means it's selected. It's got a name. It's got a type. It's type image. I can't change this type because I have to handle this image. And I can handle it in two very simple ways. One is to ignore it completely, which is meeting a WCAG standard and totally acceptable. But of course, that's not always possible because the image may have value. So the other way to handle it is to enter, of course, an alt description. So here I can put two students studying. I'll do it fast. Studying. Okay. So these students are studying. That gives me an alt tag. That's all I really need to do for this image. I could put a long description, possibly like a boy and a girl studying in front of a computer. That might add a little more value. Is it necessary? I don't know. It's a good question to start discussing, to open the conversation with your admin and see like at what level these things need to be remediated. But in this case, I'm pretty sure two students studying will suffice. I'm going to move on to this next zone. So this is our first zone that we're working with. I can see that really this is a one sentence title. So I'm not really going to need the second zone. So I can select that zone and just remove it and very easily resize this zone with my mouse to encompass both sentences as a single title. This is great. This is great. This is great. I can issue a preview now. And then with that request, whoops, let's do that again. Okay, so what I see now in HTML is I have this image. I have my single sentence title, my single sentence subtitle. I've got the date and I have this URL. So everything looks pretty good. There are a few things that I would change. Namely, this is a header and not just a text zone. So we're going to change the type. I can change the type by basically clicking on this pull down and selecting type heading. When I do so, the properties for the zone will change to accommodate what would be a heading property. So basically, in this case, it would just be the level. And it's a level 1 header. So it's going to be the only level 1 header in my document. That's automatically set for me because that's just the default. California Community College could also be considered a header. So I'm going to select type heading. It wouldn't be a level 1 though. It would be a level 2 heading. So I'm just going to stop there and I'm going to show you right here in the preview that right now I have just text assets. But since I've changed these to heading, when I ask for a preview again, we'll see that these have actually taken on the properties of a heading tag. So H1 and H2 respectively. Here I have the date. That's not a heading. It's just text, so I have nothing to do. Here I have a link. Now, Equidox didn't detect an actual clickable link from the document. So in theory, we could ignore it. That's perfectly fine. It wasn't provided to us by the publisher. So we don't really need to add that value since the publisher didn't feel it necessary. But with that said, if we do want to add value, it's totally within our capabilities to change that zone type to a link and then very easily type in the URL. If I don't want to type in the URL, down here at zone source, and we're going to look at this also a little bit later, I have 3 types of sources. PDF being the default, which is what we've been working with so far. So it'll do its best just to read some basic text out of the document. There's OCR, which we'll look at a little bit later. And then there's custom. So custom is a cool type of zone source view because it'll actually give me the contents of that zone right here in the custom text box area. And that's cool because if there's a problem with the text, meaning maybe there's one space too many or one space not enough, I can make those changes right here in custom. But for our purposes right now, it's really cool because I'm just going to copy the URL and paste it in front of the HTTP. And that's going to save me a whole lot of time. It's also going to reduce the risk of typos. But of course, if you don't want to do that, you're more than welcome to just type in the URL by hand, no problem, even Steven. So now I'm just going to click on the preview again. And what we see is that this actually turned blue, as we know links do, and there's a little underline that wasn't there before. And of course, if I open link in new tab, it's going to take me to the URL as we just typed it. So that's really fun. I'm going to save my page. So you can save your page by clicking save. You can also just click on the next arrow and it'll auto save. Those are the only two ways a page gets saved. If you click the X, it won't save. It'll just exit. So keep that in mind. It's fairly helpful when you start a remediation and maybe you don't like what's going on and you just sort of want to start over. You can just close the page and reopen it from where you last left off. Or of course you can save at any time. Also up here we have mark pages validated. So if you feel that the page is perfectly converted, you can click this arrow. It will mark the page as validated and move on to the next page. And of course, if you ever revisit the page, it will have a green checkbox where we know that the page has been validated. Next to that, we have the preview button. Next to that, we have our two zoom loops. So these are pretty handy when you have a lot of data on the page and maybe you want to get a little bit more precise with your zone manipulation. And then of course there's the I for information or shortcuts. So I had been I had been setting headers with the mouse and keyboard using the header properties area in the tab, but I can also use the shortcut keys. So basically clicking H and then the header level that I wish to choose, which I'll probably be doing for the rest of the document. So I just wanted to show you that. And then that's it for this page. So yeah, I can click on next to go to page 2, or I can click on any one of these pages to keep moving through the document. And as you can see up here, I now have a green check mark specifying that this page has been remediated. And if I exit here and go back to my document detail view, we'll also see that there's a green check mark. So let's move forward. All right, hold on, there we go. So this is an image on the page. It's a background image, so we don't actually see it as a zone here, which is kind of good for us. It means we don't have to remediate it. But if we felt that the image had value and we wanted to include it, we can just drag and drop a zone over this student and select a type of graphic. So we're going to create an image where there isn't one. And then we can go girl student. So much like the image behaves, graphics behave. There's really no difference. The only difference is that we can create and delete graphics. We can't create and delete images because those are already included with the document at the time that we received it. So if I just do a preview of this page, we're just going to see young student. And you'll notice that the frame size is identical to the size that I picked for the zone. So that shows you that. Of course, I could just ignore it because it doesn't really add any value. Something else I want to show you is that this image, if you notice here, because Equidox did not recognize any text on the page, it got concerned essentially that this might be an OCR page, which means it's an image or it's at least over 60% images or pixels, and it's going to want to try to convert this page from an image asset into a text asset. I don't have any text, so it's not really a good example. But don't worry, I have another one for us. So I'm just going to show you at this point how OCR works, and then we're going to jump right back into the doc. So this is a document that I'm just showing you. It's an OCR doc. What we see on the main page is that we got the little OCR tag, much like we did where this young student was. Now I can click on this, and we see that the zones are blue. That's fantastic. That means that they're OCR zones. Sensitivity works pretty much the same way. So you do your best to detect any given zone. So if I just leave it at 0 and draw a zone like this over here, and then do a preview, I'm going to see no text because this is an image. So what I want to do is leave my type as text because it's text I'm looking for at the end of the day. I'm just going to change the source to OCR and then click convert to text. So what this will do is just send a snapshot to Google and bring me back text assets equivalent to the assets found in this document. So now if I click preview, I'll get some actual text assets. So I just wanted to show you that. We may look more at OCR in the advanced tutorial, but I didn't want to leave it out of the beginner one. I wanted you guys to at least have an idea that it existed. And I also wanted you to understand why this little OCR tag showed up on page 2. So that's done because we're handling it by ignoring it, which is a fine way to do things on occasion. Thank you. I'm good. So I'm going to mark that as done. I'm going to skip page 3 only for 1 second and come right back to it because this is a bit more complex than this page here. So on this page, I'm going to want you to recognize a couple of things. The first one is that automatically Equidox was able to detect quite a bit of stuff, but we can see very clearly that that's not exactly the paragraph structure we're expecting. The screen reader is going to read really weird. This isn't a header yet, so that's not good. This is a list, so we're going to look at the list type in just a second, but that's not a list. I'll also ask you to notice that the reading order goes from 1 to 2, and then right over here to 3. So 3's over here. Then it goes 4, 5, 6, and then 7. That's not great. And if we look at the reading order in the what's the word, preview, my apologies, we see right away that there's actually a huge problem. It's that it's reading from top down, left to right, which makes total sense in most cases, but obviously not in this one. So it's reading that the past decade emphasis, and then goes right on to read complete an accessibility audit. So that's absolutely nonsensical and not something we want to publish. So it's not enough just to scan a page. It's not enough just to do OCR. It's not enough just to identify these things in a single pass. It's going to take a little bit of work from our end to ensure the integrity of these assets. So as we learned previously, the first thing we'll want to do is adjust the sensitivity until we get a structure that makes sense to us. And this does. So I'll just do a preview right away to show you how much change has been applied. So now I've got a much clearer paragraph structure. I can see that the reading order is still not great. It's not perfect. I got some problems with this list, but we're going to fix all of that. So now that I've got my sensitivity set to 11, which seems to be a sensitivity at least I appreciate, I'm ready to move into my zone manipulation. So really quickly, this is a header. So I've selected that zone, and on my keyboard, I am clicking H3. So you can see that the type was automatically changed to heading and the level to 3. So that's a lot faster than clicking on the pull down and selecting level 3. So as you see through the document, there's going to be a whole bunch of H3s. So I'm just going to click H3 on my keyboard each time I encounter one. That's fun. That's easy. So now I'll just do a preview right away to show you that institutional impact takes on an H3 tag. This paragraph looks absolutely fantastic. I don't see any problems there. This is a list. So working with lists is fun, at least in Equidox. I don't know if it's fun anywhere else. And the way this works is that basically we're just going to want to create a single zone. I'll use this one that already exists right here. I'll just resize it to accommodate the whole list. And then what I'm going to do is change my type to type lists. And you'll see that a little green bar pops up here. So before we had noticed that there was a blue zone, that's OCR. This green bar indicates list. There's a few other identifiable zone types that we'll see throughout the training, and I'll make a note of them as we encounter them. So as I choose list type, once again, the properties for my zone have changed. I can now insert a caption, first list that we're doing. The summary, it really is the first list. And then we'll talk about merge and break line later on. And then here I have a list type. So there's no way for us to infer the list type. It's not detectable. So we have to prescribe it. So we're going to tell the system that it's unordered. It's just a bunch of bullets, no big deal. If it were ordered, and there is an ordered list in this document that we will see later, I can click on ordered and again prescribe my required type of list. So lower or uppercase letter, lower uppercase Roman, and of course numeric. But in this case, simply unordered. Then I'm going to auto detect. So what it will do is go in and auto detect each of these list items, and then essentially create a zone for each of those. Each of these has its own properties that I can alter, much like any other zone. The only difference is they'll be encapsulated, whoops, sorry about that, inside a list. And then this list type is going to give me in HTML and in PDF a list type with list item types. So that's going to make it really easy for us to ensure the quality of a list to the end user. So as we can see here, my list is not a list. It's just reading as 5 distinct paragraphs. But now that I've created this list and the list items using the auto detect and unordered as a setting, when I issue the preview, I see right away that this is now actually being treated as a list. This is part 1 of 5 parts. It's very clear, and anyone using this document will very clearly understand that. So what I can see here now is that I got my header intact, my paragraph, I've created a list, and I've got my last paragraph. And of course my page number at the bottom with the what you call footnote, I guess. So this is optional. If I wanted to ignore page numbers because maybe it's not important in this case, or it's just too much work, or they're not on every page and I want to be consistent, it's just as easy as deleting the zone. Of course, then I can do a preview, sorry. And that would be gone there. But if I wanted to just maybe include only the page number, I could make a smaller zone, do the preview again. Oops. See, I have a page order number issue. So to rectify page ordering, you go to page and you select reading order. For this example, 2 columns, and I'll reorder. And you'll see that it's giving new numbers to all these zones. And what's funny is that it won't actually fix my page number. And does anyone know why? I can tell you. It's because we're reading from top down, and it'll read the 2, and then it'll come back to the top and then read this side. So while the automatic page reordering will help me, so if I make this, let's say, zone number 20, it will read last on the page. So we'll see the past decade drop right to the bottom of the page. So that's not helpful. That's going to get read last. That's not what we need at all. So I'll go to reading order and just reorder the page in 2-column form. That will, of course, move my paragraph right back to the top. I still have a problem with the page number. It's not really a problem. All I need to do, if I want it to be read in an order that makes sense, is just change the zone reading order right here. So in this case, I want it read last. Last would mean number 12. So it's just as easy as giving it zone 12. And then I'm able to essentially either automatically using the page reorder tool to reorder the page, or manually using my keyboard to just enter the order ID. So in most cases, I'll tell you that we use the tool, but for things like headers and footers, it is sometimes required, we just enter in a value that is greater than the last or other small modifications to reading order. But it's pretty rare. In most cases, automatic reorder will do most of the work for you.
Solely, may I just jump in really quick? I know we got about 10 minutes left, and there may or may not be questions. Hopefully there are. Do we have time to do maybe a quick table
Yes.
to show them? And I think that we could wrap it up after that and maybe take some questions, if that's good with Sean and Angela. And we'll take it from there.
Perfect. So just before I leave this page, we will do a table. I just wanted to point out that this image that we saw earlier is actually not accessible here. It's not a zone. I don't have to worry about it. And if you recall, we handled it very early on in the conversion process via the Images tab. So for those that joined us possibly late, or those that have already forgotten about the Images tab because you're learning far too much today, that's way over here. So you can see that this has been updated with my 2 students studying from page 1, and we can see that on page 4, this is not used because I hid it. So I could always make it visible again, and of course I could go put an alt tag like a bunch of pillars, but of course that doesn't add value. So I'm just going to show you a table. So on page 9, we have a table. Like any page, the first thing we do is hit the accessibility slider, find a paragraph structure that works. This looks great. If I preview, we're going to see that this is not working for us, this table. I mean, this is not a table at all. This is a bunch of paragraphs. It's something we want to fix. So we're going to draw a zone on top of this table just like that. We're going to go to our zone types, and we're going to select type table. You'll see down here once again that we have a change in the properties, and one of those changes is the invocation of the table editor. We're going to click on that, and a new screen opens, presenting us with the table editor. I love the table editor because it's drag and drop. What you see is what you get. Let me just get the proper zoom here. So the way this works is we take a snapshot of the table, we put it on the screen for you, and then what you're going to do is very basically line up the cells to the table delimiters, meaning the cells again. This looks pretty good, except as you can tell under my mouse, I have a few too many rows. So what we do is we just select the cell and we merge that row down. So now I have a much more logical row structure. I'll probably need to do the same thing here, merge down, and I'll probably need to do the same thing here, merge down. I'm sure, as you could guess, I could also split the row or split a column. And if you can't guess, I can also span. So if ever there was a title row or something like that, we are able to handle spanning. But in this case, we don't need it. I'm going to request a preview again, just like we do in the regular page view. What we see here is that I actually have a table, and that looks pretty good. It actually looks perfect. If I didn't find it looked perfect, I could make a few changes by managing these guides, of course, splitting or merging additional rows and columns. Once I'm convinced that the tabular data represents what it's supposed to, I can save this table and then exit back to my page. And what we'll see now is everything together. So I got a reading order issue again. I have my page number with the footer in the wrong place. That's because the last cell gets the last number. So really quickly, it's just a quick reorder of the page, and then I'm able to look and see that my page number will have dropped down. Best practices requires an H3, so I use my keyboard. One last preview, and we're done. So that's it, a table. So with the 7 minutes that are left, Pat, I invite you to field questions, please.
Yes, that was excellent. Thank you for that, Solely. And one of the questions that we had there is somebody would like to just see the export functionality of a document. Solely.
Was I on mute?
Possibly. So,
Okay.
there was a question on the table, and then to show how to export the file.
Okay. So for the export, I knew this question was coming, and I did a TV Magic one. So like on chef shows, when they already have one in the oven. So this document has been completely remediated. It was done using TV Magic. So I'm going to show you really quickly each page. This one was one I skipped, but I'd be happy to review it in the advanced tutorial. There's the list like we did. So every page in here has been properly remediated. I'm just giving you a quick view as we go through. Here we've got yet another level of headings, H4. So we keep looking. Everything looks great. Everything looks great. There's the table we just did. Here's some more lists, as we saw earlier. You can notice there's a hyperlink embedded in this last paragraph. So there's our link type, and then there's our URL, and then we can see that right here in the HTML preview. Everything's super. Here's a numbered list. So much like an unnumbered list, we can have, as you can see, numbered lists. And then the last page, I created a graphic just to allow us to include the logo. Once all that's done, you go to output. If you want an HTML output, you click download HTML, and that'll put a zip file on your hard drive with all the images and HTML files local that you can give to a friend and share, put on your LMS or CMS. If you want to have a PDF, you just click on generate PDF. So that's going to go ahead and generate, but again, TV Magic, I have one ready. I just can't seem to get that. Okay, there we go. CCC, and then, so this was my export here. So this is a PDF that's been remediated, and I'll just show you in quick brief that this is a tag tree, and these are the tags that we just created, including, say, like the alt tag for this image. If I look at the properties for that image, it's students working together. So that was from my TV Magic one, not the one we just did. But that's where all that work we've done comes together to populate the tag tree for the PDF, the HTML, the alt tag info, and it's just as simple as clicking that export button once you're done at the end of the day with your remediation. So now there's a question on tables. I'm happy to answer it. What question might it be? Is there a question on tables?
Actually, I think someone was just asking if to demonstrate how you did that. I think we captured that already. Perhaps my suggestion would be to the individual to come back and visit on Thursday when we're going to go into more detail and some other examples on how to deal with data tables inside of the documents and how you can use the various properties fields to address tables and that information. There was a question solely that came in. Is there an erase last change feature? For instance, like an undo button if you make a mistake?
Unfortunately, not at the moment. It's something we're trying to get into play. The only reason is that this capability in a web browser to drag and drop, create zones, move zones, and resize them is very intensive on the browser cache, and we haven't found a way to successfully preserve variable states of that cache. We're working on it for you very hard, and as soon as it's ready, you will know. But for the moment, no, there's no capability. I'll just recommend you save often. I'm sure we all know how to do that with our experience in Adobe remediation. Saving is our best friend.
Questions from the audience at this time?